The sand was black on Rixar 7, black like oil, black like charred bone. And tonight it was wet with blood. Aeon crouched low behind the corpse of a Zauri brute, 7 feet of armored muscle. Now lying motionless, throat slashed open. The roar of the crowd above thundered like a storm, voices layered with clicks. Screeches and warbles, the Corvith were entertained. That meant the killing would go on. Her breath came in short, burning bursts. Her right arm trembled under the weight of a borrowed weapon, if it could be called that. A jagged shard of alloy broken from the arena wall, still sticky with blood. Not hers, not yet, across the circular battlefield. 2 more fighters circled each other, a humanoid with serpentine limbs and a centaur-like creature covered in electric barbs. Both were bleeding, both were desperate just like her. No introductions, no rules, just death. Aeon hadn't spoken in days. Not since the last fight when her words, whispered to a dying creature's mind, had triggered a seizure in the neural suppressor they'd implanted at the base of her skull. It was better not to speak, not even to think too loudly. She pressed her fingers to the cut on her side, shallow but it stung. The sand around her boots clung like ash. Suddenly the entire Colosseum pulsed deep, like a heartbeat through stone. Then came a sound that silenced even the Corvith. It wasn't a scream, it wasn't a roar, it was pain. Aeon rose slightly from behind the corpse, her eyes darting toward the far corner of the arena, the shadows where no one dared look too long, and there it was, the star beast. Even chained, it loomed like a small moon, its body a tangle of obsidian plates and glowing veins of energy. Pulsating with an unnatural rhythm, 4 legs bound to the platform. 2 massive arms shackled at the elbows, a mask of shimmering steel fused to its face, carved with alien runes that flickered every few seconds. It hadn't moved in months, it hadn't made a sound. Until now, its head turned, the chains groaned as if protesting the motion. Its single, visible eye, silver with no pupil, locked onto her. Not in hunger, not in rage, in recognition. Aeon felt her pulse slow. Then quicken, her mind recoiled from what she was seeing. But her body, her damn body stepped forward, despite everything screaming at her to hide. On the balcony above, one of the Corvith nobles hissed. Its voice triggered a projection over the arena, a booming translation that echoed. Contestants, return to combat protocols. Victory only by elimination. But Aeon couldn't look away from the star beast. She had heard of it in murmurs, always chained, always watching. Never unleashed, the ultimate threat, a creature captured during the Wars of Collapse. Said to have destroyed an entire lunar colony with a breath. But this wasn't a weapon. What she saw now was not a monster. It was a prisoner. Another pulse shook the sand. Aeon blinked, and a memory not her own flashed behind her eyes. A vast nebula, stars being sung into existence by something ancient and lonely. A planet burned, a final cry for mercy that never came. She gasped and stumbled back, clutching her temples. It hadn't touched her, but something inside the creature had reached through the space between them, and she had felt it. Felt it like she had felt the dying thoughts of a dozen other beings in this arena. But never like this. This wasn't a voice, it was a question. Why did you come here? Aeon didn't answer, couldn't. Not aloud, but part of her, the part they hadn't killed, whispered back, I didn't choose this. The star beast's chains glowed faintly, as if stirred by her thought. Above, alarms began to blare in a frequency only the Corvith could understand. Something about biolinks, neural interference, cross-species resonance. Aeon didn't care. All she saw was that eye still locked on her. Waiting, another combatant charged her from the right, something spindly with a blade for a mouth. She dodged, sliced upward with the alloy shard, and turned the creature's blood into steam on contact. More screaming from the crowd, More blood on the sand. She didn't even pause. She just looked again to the corner. The star beast had lowered its head, not in defeat, not in submission, in sorrow, and for the first time since she was captured. Since they had forced her to fight and kill and survive like an animal, Aeon felt something she hadn't let herself feel. Pity, not for herself, for it. She tightened her grip on the shard. She was told to survive, but no one told her what to do when she saw a chained soul. Aeon Varro didn't remember the moment she was sold. Only the moment she stopped screaming. It had happened somewhere between the third blackout injection and the cold of interstellar transport, her wrists still raw from restraint cuffs. Her last memory of Earth, or whatever broken city remained of it, was a voice offering her a choice. Use your gift. Help us break them or be discarded. She chose silence. And silence chose her in return. They called her a neural empath, one of the rare few born with an enhanced ability to feel, interpret, and reflect the emotional signals of other sentient beings. With a single touch, Aeon could glimpse memory fragments, echo pain, desire, like wires plugged directly into the soul. She was supposed to become a tool for human expansion. An interrogator, a weapon of empathy. Instead, she became cargo. By the time she was auctioned to the handlers of Reichsar 7, her identity had been compressed into a data tag hanging from her neck. Cognitive interface asset, class tier 3, species human. Status untrained. She remembered the look the Corvith broker gave her, slitted eyes flickering over her like she was meat wrapped in tech. She doesn't speak, one of the auctioneers said, like it was a selling point. But she screams real nice when you let the beast get too close. Aeon hadn't spoken since. That silence was a sanctuary. In the Colosseum, in the cages between fights, during the injections and the constant threat of neural collapse, protected her from their curiosity, their manipulation, and worst of all, their attempts to harness her. She refused to be readable, but that didn't mean she wasn't watching. Even behind bruised eyelids and clenched fists, Aeon noticed everything. How the guards paused whenever a fighter cried out in the wrong tone. How the food changed texture when someone nearby had screamed in their dreams. How the floor of her cell vibrated on every fifth night with a low-frequency hum, like the heartbeat of a machine no one wanted to name, and above all she noticed the pain of others. Not just the bleeding, physical kind, the real pain. The kind that lived in the eyes of the insected fighter, with half its limbs replaced. The sorrow radiating from the Avix twins, who communicated only by touch because they'd had their tongues removed. The quiet despair of the male human across from her, who stared at the ceiling as if counting stars he'd never see again. Aeon never reached out. She couldn't afford to. The last time she'd touched someone deliberately, her mind had been filled with such terror and betrayal that she vomited for 2 hours afterward. The creature, once a gentle aquatic healer from the seas of Varus, had been tortured into fighting its own kin. And through that single brush of skin against scale, Aeon had felt every moment of it. It wasn't just reading emotions, it was reliving them. She learned to fear her own hands. Still, the memories crept in. Accidental contact, a brush of shoulder in the feeding queue, a heel pressing against another prisoner's toe during transport. Whispers of pain slipping into her thoughts like smoke under a locked door. Her body might have belonged to the arena, but her mind, her gift, remained untamed. She kept it that way on purpose. Survival, not salvation. That was her rule, and yet it broke. It broke during a medical check 2 rotations before her scheduled match. A routine inspection, pulse scans, eye dilation, basic neural stability. The medbay was cold and pulsing with antiseptic light. A Corvith technician waved her toward a platform. She obeyed, expression blank, posture obedient. She didn't see the creature until she sat down. It was on the table beside hers, restrained, leaking a dull green fluid from a lacerated flank. Something avian and serpentine, its feathers mottled and twitching, breathing in short, pitiful gasps. Aeon didn't mean to touch it. Her hand slipped as the platform adjusted, and her fingers brushed its wing. Just a second, and in that second, a planet burning from orbit, a child screaming underwater, 1,000 miles of sky. Crushed by silence, a heartbeat fading with a whisper. I didn't mean to run. Aeon pulled her hand back as if burned. Her vision blurred, her ears rang, the Corvus didn't notice. But something else had. The creature, despite its agony, turned to look at her. Its eyes, shaped like a crescent moon, turned backward, locked onto hers with raw recognition. Not thanks, not blame, just you saw me. She turned away. Her heart slammed against her ribs. What was she doing? This was survival. Not sympathy, not rescue. If she started feeling, she would not stop. And yet something cracked, because in that flicker of memory, Aeon had seen something she couldn't unsee. The same thing she'd seen in her own dreams, a starless sky. A cage, a voice calling into the void with no answer. She was not the only one being used, not the only one shackled. There were hundreds, thousands of beings here with stories she might never touch. And maybe that was for the best. Empathy was a door. And if you opened it too far, it never closed again. But in that moment, Aeon made a second choice. She would still survive. Still hide, still keep her gift from being turned into a weapon. But deep beneath all that, she began to wonder, if no one stops them, who will? And that question, like a splinter in her soul, refused to go away. The cell Aeon was dragged into was colder than the last. She felt it in her bones, in the way her breath misted just enough to remind her she was still alive. Chains didn't rattle here, they pulsed. The walls throbbed faintly with electrostatic hums. And the floor was wet from something no one bothered to identify. They didn't even bother to remove the corpse from the last fight. Aeon's boots crunched on a blood-stained plate as she was shoved toward the center ring. Another match, another dance with death. This time they wanted a show. A direct duel, no terrain, no crowd obstacles, just two combatants and one feed broadcast across the outer sectors. Ratings had dropped. The Corvus needed something new. Something more intimate. They chose Aeon, and a thing that used to be human. The other combatant entered through the opposite gate. 7 feet tall, armored in patches of exposed steel and sagging flesh. Limbs reinforced with surgical rods, eyes long replaced by optic slits, glowing red. Its mouth was sealed with mesh and wires, but something like a jaw moved beneath the restraints. Aeon froze. It was still breathing, no animalistic stance. No snarl. It walked in with its back straighter than the guards who escorted it. Like a doctor called into a war zone and never told it could leave. A number was stamped across its shoulder. 43. She'd heard rumors of the M-class projects, failed attempts to turn medical clones into programmable assassins. All were thought to have been recycled. Apparently not all. The fight began with a soundless pulse. Aeon shifted, her broken alloy blade clutched in her right hand. She didn't attack, neither did the thing in front of her. Instead, it stepped forward and extended one trembling hand. The arena system buzzed, confused by the lack of aggression. Aeon didn't know why she reached out. Maybe exhaustion. Maybe defiance. Maybe something deeper. Their fingers touched. And her world split open. A bright room, white floors. Children laughing in another room. A hand, steady and warm, stitching synthetic skin onto a burn victim. A voice saying, "You saved another one today, Myro." Then the room turned red. Sirens, panic, screams. A table, restraints, electrodes. We need him to kill, not care. A needle entering the skull, memory fraying pain. Silence, a heartbeat. Aeon recoiled. She fell to her knees, gasping. She couldn't stop shaking. The thing Myro stood unmoving, as if even its gestures had been programmed out of order. It had once been a healer, a man who held hands to calm children after surgery. Now reduced to a walking gun, and still, somewhere inside, a fragment of that healer remained. Enough to hesitate, enough to remember. She looked up. The guards above were talking. One of them raised a weapon, preparing to end the standoff. Then came a cough from the shadows near the maintenance corridor. A man stepped forward, slender, older, wearing a ragged officer's coat patched with human insignia. Aeon had seen him before, but never close. He was one of the quartermasters, in charge of ration inventory and waste disposal, duties unfit for aliens. Rumor said he used to be an Earth soldier. Rumor also said he'd watched 5 humans die just to avoid showing empathy. But his voice was sharp, low, measured. "If you keep feeling like that," he said without looking at her, "you'll die faster than the rest." Aeon blinked, unsure if he was addressing her or himself. He continued, still scanning the arena interface. "They know what you are. Sooner or later, they'll push something in your head and flip the switch." She didn't speak. He didn't wait for her to. "Blood spiral," he said, turning to leave. "They've scheduled you for it." That stopped her breath. She had heard the name whispered in fear. Fighters trapped with a wild variable in a closed arena. Total chaos, no exits, no team support, only pain. And in this case, the wild variable wasn't unknown. It was the Star Beast. That night, Aeon sat in her cell with her back against the corner wall, watching shadows move across the ceiling. Her skin still tingled from the echo of Myro's memory. The pain of being transformed, the fragments of identity barely clinging to existence. She closed her eyes, and the sound came again, a frequency beyond what the Colosseum should allow. Not spoken, not heard, felt low, throbbing like sorrow wrapped in metal. The Star Beast was calling, not like before, not the distant rumble of a beast caged for spectacle. This was different. There was rhythm, intention, desperation. Aeon pressed her palm to the metal wall. A vibration met her bones, a shudder that matched the pulse she'd felt during the last match. The same resonance, the same signature. The Star Beast wasn't just roaring. It was asking the same question she had asked herself over and over. Why am I still here? A memory from her own childhood crept back, barefoot on a rooftop under smog skies, listening for something greater. Back then, she believed stars had voices. Now, she was beginning to wonder if that had ever truly been a lie. But this wasn't wonder, it was grief, the kind that made creatures lose their names. She curled her knees to her chest. If she freed it, if she even tried, the arena would burn. Thousands could die, prisoners, staff, perhaps innocents far beyond the Colosseum walls. But if she didn't, it would rot, alone, bound, stripped of memory. Like Myro, like her, she opened her eyes. There would be no more silence. The arena was unlike anything Aeon had seen before. Gone were the jagged rocks, the artificial hills, the sculpted terrain designed to mimic war zones. Tonight's match was held in a perfect circle of obsidian metal, flat and gleaming like oil. A mirrored dome covered the top, showing the crowd their own reflections, their own cruelty. At the center, a spiral of red lines glowed on the floor, radiating outward like veins from a wound. The blood spiral. Aeon stood in the 4th quadrant, armed with nothing but her fists and instinct. 3 others had already been released into the circle, fighters she had known in brief flickers of exhausted glances. And rationed water, Juo the insectoid, Thalen the avian hybrid with hollow bones and a soft heart, and Yuta a quiet, scaled being who had once shielded her from a thrown tray. All of them had been caged, all of them had shared the same silence. Now they were weapons, They didn't charge immediately. They didn't scream. They looked at each other and then at her. A projection flared above. Survival required, teammates irrelevant. The spiral began to hum. Aeon's heart beat faster. Not from fear, from fury. The blood spiral wasn't about tactics. It was about forcing the unwilling to destroy each other. A psychological furnace, a test of how much soul could be burned before breaking. The first blow came from behind. Aeon turned too late. Ju's arm, now fused with a serrated blade, slashed across her ribs. She stumbled, gritting her teeth, tasting blood. "Don't," she gasped. But he couldn't stop. They had been injected, primed. Their eyes were glassy, not mindless but overridden. Aeon dodged the next strike, spun, rolled toward Thalen. He hesitated, but Yuta lunged at her with an electrified baton. 3-on-1, she didn't fight to kill, she fought to stay conscious. She ducked under the next swing and swept Ju's legs. As he fell, she saw the smallest flicker in his gaze, regret. Or recognition. Then Thalen struck, not at her but at Ju. A wing slammed into the insectoid's chest, knocking him back. The spiral flared brighter, a punishment for disobedience. Thalen cried out, clutching his head. His wings spasmed uncontrollably. Yuta moved to strike him. Aeon grabbed her arm mid-swing. And in that moment, her hand made contact with Yuta's skin. A child hiding beneath a collapsed shelter, 2 moons in the sky, one cracked and bleeding. A voice over comms, "Evac ships full, do not approach." Her child screaming in a language no longer recognized. Acid rain falling on skin that blistered instantly. The last image, her hand pressed against the evac glass as her daughter vanished into the void. Aeon screamed, not from pain, from the sheer weight of memory. She collapsed, breath ragged, mind trembling. Yuta stood still, shaking. Her baton fell from her hand. Their eyes met, and for a moment, just a moment, they remembered they were never enemies. Then the world shook. The chains screamed. From the far side of the spiral, the star beast reared its head. The sound it made wasn't a roar. It was mourning. The floor around it cracked. Plasma fences surged. The air went sharp and metallic. Chains that had held for decades lit up with fail-safe runes, but even they began to flicker. Panic rose in the stands. Corvith nobles shifted uneasily. Some began to chant. Others watched with thinly veiled fear. Aeon's breath caught. The star beast wasn't just reacting. It was resonating with her. She didn't think, she ran. Across the spiral, past the fallen, past the glowing bloodlines that etched pain into every step. Every Corvith weapon turret trained on her back. She reached the edge of the arena, where the star beast's platform stood, raised and pulsing like a heart about to rupture. Its eye met hers again, and in her mind, a sky of nebulas, endless, warm. Alive, a dance through gas clouds that sang like choirs, laughter in ultraviolet light, and then silence, and then. "Chains, I once flew among stars. Why am I dragged here?" The words weren't spoken. They were felt. Aeon placed her hand on the living armor of the creature's chest. The surface was warm, like flesh wrapped in starlight. Pulsing with barely contained grief, her voice shook, but she whispered anyway. "I don't know, but I'm sorry." The first lock glowed. And then it clicked. A high-pitched tone rang out, shrieking through the dome. The first shackle, one of 6, unlatched. Every eye turned to her. A warning siren exploded. Cannons shifted. Auto turrets armed. Aeon stood firm. The second shackle hissed steam but held. The star beast looked down at her, unmoving. Then it howled. Not in rage, in allegiance. Its remaining shackles strained but did not snap. Its massive arms moved, just enough to position itself between her and the turrets. The audience panicked. The control room blared. Aeon stepped back, breathing hard. Her skin burned from residual energy. Her body trembled. She had committed the ultimate crime, not escape, not sabotage. Compassion. She turned around slowly. The other fighters stood still. Juo, Thalen, Yuta, none of them moved. For the first time since the match began, Aeon saw what the Corvith feared most. Not rebellion, connection, the kind that couldn't be programmed out or beaten into submission. Aeon dropped the weapon in her hand. The Star Beast lowered its head beside her, a gesture of shield and acceptance. It did not kill her, it protected her, and above them the spiral dimmed not from failure. From awakening. The first explosion tore through the south wall of the arena like a scream finally given form. The Colosseum, once a perfectly calibrated spectacle of suffering, was now chaos incarnate. Corvith nobles scrambled from their balconies, their decorative limbs flickering with alarm as emergency sirens drowned the air. Drones swarmed the blood spiral, scanning wildly, confused by broken signals and unexpected silence where violence was. Supposed to roar, Aeon didn't move. She stood beside the Star Beast as it exhaled smoke and fury. Its massive chest, rising like a mountain, shaking off centuries of snow. She could feel its thoughts, more clearly now than ever before. Not words, not demands, gratitude and concern. It lowered its massive body so that one plated shoulder met her height. It waited. Aeon climbed. Her hands found smooth ridges between its armor-bone plating, her legs gripping instinctively. The moment she settled, the creature rose, and the ground became air. Plasma fences activated. A wall of energy shot up around the arena perimeter, burning white with lethal voltage. Guards shouted, control units recalibrated, and then the Corvith gave the order. Cleanse the pit, no witnesses. From hidden panels above the Colosseum, hatches hissed open. Sleek black drones descended, each armed with ion disruptors and micromissile racks. Aeon's vision blurred, her heart pounded, but before fear could settle, a gunshot rang out, not from above, but from the access tunnel, behind the maintenance gate. The human quartermaster staggered forward. His face was pale. A plasma wound scorched across his side, leaking smoke. He dragged his leg as he punched a manual override key embedded in the wall, one final act of rebellion. The inner gate hissed open. A few fighters, those who still breathed, those who still remembered who they were, began to run. He turned toward Aeon one last time, his mouth moving without voice. She understood anyway. Don't stop here. A second shot hit him in the back. He fell. Aeon closed her eyes. The Star Beast roared. Not like before, not in pain, not in memory. It was a sound of fury, the kind that twisted metal, shattered drone hulls, and disrupted targeting systems in a single pulse. Then it charged, straight into the plasma wall. Aeon braced as heat licked at her skin. The creature didn't hesitate. Its body, once a prisoner, now became a conduit of defiance. The wall cracked. The arena erupted. They broke through the barrier in a burst of sparks and scorched air, crashing into the outer corridors of the Colosseum, where more prisoners were kept in cages, watched by remote AI and low-tier guards. Aeon scanned the chaos. Everywhere creatures were waking. Not physically, emotionally. They were watching her asterisk. Not just because she rode the beast, but because something in the way she stared back said, I remember you. She didn't speak. She reached. Aeon placed one hand against the Star Beast's nape and opened herself. Her gift, long sealed, long feared, was no longer a burden. It was a bridge, and now she let it burn. A wave of raw emotional current surged from her chest, through her arm, into the creature, and from the creature into the air. The Star Beast became a transmitter. Aeon became a signal. The resonance spread like wildfire, amplified by emotion, trauma, memory. Her gift linked not just her and the beast, but everyone within reach who had felt what she'd felt. Everyone who had lost their name, their dignity, their voice. It wasn't telepathy. It was asterisk truth asterisk, and the arena's systems built to suppress and surveil could not contain it. In the broadcast center above the Colosseum, dozens of feeds began to stutter. Error codes flashed, firewalls collapsed, redundant controls were overridden not by programming, but by waves of neural data too complex, too intimate, too human to categorize. Then the memories started playing, not scripts, not stories. Real lives, across every screen in every transmission chamber. And into the devices of millions watching across the outer systems. Flashes of trauma, betrayal, hope, loss. A child losing its parent in zero gravity. A soldier forced to kill their twin. A healer watching their hands replaced by weapons. A starborn creature falling into silence as its wings were cut. The screams were real, the sobs were real, and so was the quiet voice of Aeon Varro. Finally broadcast into every corner of the galaxy, not by microphone, but by memory. Let them hear what they silenced. All across the arena the weapons stopped. The drones malfunctioned. Even some guards, staggering under the emotional weight of what they now saw, lowered their rifles. The audience fled, some stayed, some wept, and Aeon, still riding the creature that had once been chained like a trophy, now stood tall as every lie the Corvus had built around this place began to crumble. The star beast slowed. Its claws dug into the last section of flooring outside the broadcast tower. Behind them, the prisoners who could walk followed. Not an army, a procession. Aeon slid down, her feet touching ash-covered stone. The star beast kneeled beside her. Above, the night sky of Rixar 7 stretched endless and black. She looked toward it, and knew one thing: she had chosen not to kill them. She had chosen to show them, and in that choice she had broken the cycle. No firestorm, no revenge, just truth laid bare. The silence that followed was deeper than any roar. The collapse didn't begin with gunfire, it began with silence. A silence that rippled outward from Rixar 7 across the spiral arms of the galaxy, through news channels, pirate feeds, and encrypted diplomatic backdoors. Not silence as in emptiness, but silence that followed after the truth was heard. After the scream ended, after the images played on loop and the world remembered it had once applauded monsters. The Corvus denied everything at first. They called it a breach. An act of terrorism. A human biological weapon unleashed into an alien theater of peacekeeping. But the recording said otherwise. So did the witnesses. And more importantly, so did the memories. Because what Aeon had transmitted was not falsifiable. No actor could conjure that kind of pain. No propaganda department could fake the fragmented voices of hundreds of creatures begging to be remembered. Within 2 weeks, the Intergalactic Ethics Council ordered an emergency audit of every entertainment facility under Corvus jurisdiction. Within 1 month, the arenas went dark. Colosseums, training pits, memory mines, shut down, sealed, condemned. The Corvus regime didn't fall in fire. It crumbled under the weight of its own reflection. And through it all, Aeon Varro was never seen. No medals. No titles. No interviews. She vanished as if the woman who had broken the cycle of silence was only a story told by those who had suffered, but she was very much alive. She chose exile, not because the world didn't offer her a place, but because she no longer trusted what places meant. On the edge of a fading star system, orbiting a dying sun, there was a planet with no name in any trade route. It had no life of its own, no colonies, no resource worth mining. It was where the broken went aheal. The star beast, once larger than warships, had changed since Rixar 7. Freed from its chains, it no longer needed to posture. Its form shrank over time, not because it was weakening, but because it was becoming closer to what it had once been. Sleek, serene, A creature of stars, not shackles, it had no name Aeon could pronounce. But she called it Solari, not for the sun, for the warmth it gave back to her life. Together they built no city, no beacon, just a home. A sanctuary of stone and moss, nestled in the mouth of a long-dead volcano. The air smelled like copper and old rain. The sky cracked sometimes with green lightning, but Aeon found it beautiful. There she stopped running, but she did not stop remembering. Each night she sat with Solari beneath the stars neither of them truly belonged to. And she began to write, not with words or symbols but with waves. Emotional pulses, neural harmonics shaped like thought, shaped like asterisk feeling. Her gift had never been for interrogation. It had always been for connection. And so she recorded, not events but experiences. Not facts but truths, a kind of emotional journal. Preserved in a crystalline grid they buried beneath the soil, broadcasting nothing, only waiting to be found. So that if anyone came after they would know. The galaxy, meanwhile, did what galaxies always do. It forgot not all at once, not entirely, but the headlines faded. The tribunal slowed, the grief was archived, and soon the noise returned, new entertainments, new divisions, new causes. But something had changed. A law was passed across 6 systems. No sentient may be caged for the purpose of spectacle. Another law followed, in whispers. Any human with resonance capabilities must be catalogued. Aeon's gift had started a revolution and a hunt. Governments, corporate alliances, shadow organizations, they began searching. Not just for her, but for others asterisk like her. Humans who could link minds, who could stir revolt without firing a shot. Who could make empires feel what they wanted to forget. Rumors spread of laboratories reopened, of children vanishing, of memory networks being built for more than preservation. Aeon heard none of it. She did not check the signals. She let the stars speak for themselves, and when she closed her eyes at night she saw them, not just the ones she had saved, but the ones who hadn't made it, the ones who whispered through her even now, like old songs carried on wind. She had not freed them all, but she had given them back their voice. And in doing so, had given herself something unexpected. Peace, not the kind bought through distance or denial, but the kind earned by choosing not to destroy what hurt you, only to understand it. One evening, long after Solari had curled beside her in sleep, Aeon sat alone near the ridge. She reached into the earth, brushing her hand across the crystalline grid she had carved. Her fingers pulsed, one last message, a feeling like open sky and fear and hope braided together. Then she whispered, "We are not what they made us to be. We are what we choose to remember." The wind carried it into the dark. The Hall of Echoes was shaped like a spiral, its ceiling curved to mimic the waveforms of thought. The architecture designed not just for acoustics, but for resonance. It was here, beneath banners of 600 planetary unions, that the Interstellar Congress convened for the first unified ethics symposium since the fall of the Corvith arenas. Representatives from every quadrant were present, scholars, survivors, legislators, former prisoners, even delegates of species that once profited from the bloodshed. They gathered not to argue but to listen, and it was a human, gray-haired, soft-spoken, once a junior researcher on empathy mapping, who took the podium to speak of the woman history had almost forgotten. He began with no fanfare, only with a truth that silenced the room. "She didn't win by spilling blood," he said, voice steady. "She won by revealing it." Images flickered behind him, recovered footage, soundless now, of Aeon standing beside the star beast, unarmed, unflinching. Eyes focused not on the crowd, not on vengeance, but on something deeper. Something older. She didn't roar, she didn't lead an army. She simply chose not to look away. He told them what little was confirmed. How Aeon Varro, born to a ruined Earth sector, was taken as cargo, trained for empathy extraction. Then lost to the trade routes, only to reappear years later not as a weapon but as a witness. How she had entered the blood spiral and emerged not triumphant, but transformed. How she had freed not just the Star Beast, but the memories of an entire generation silenced beneath entertainment and protocol. She could have burned them all, the speaker said. She had the beast, she had the pain, but she chose a different fire, the kind that illuminates. The chamber didn't applaud. They couldn't. Some lowered their heads. Others clenched their hands, not in anger but in awe. Because deep down they understood. Aeon's act had never been a rebellion. It was a asterisk reminder asterisk. A mirror. Her journals were not discovered until a scavenger team found the crystalline grid on an unmarked planet orbiting a red dwarf long believed sterile. The signals were encrypted, not with code but with emotion. Each pulse had to be felt asterisk, not read. Each entry demanded stillness, vulnerability. It took years to compile, longer to interpret, but when they did, a picture emerged, not of Aeon as a revolutionary, but as something rarer, a human who had learned when not to fight. Her entries were poetic, fragmented, raw, sometimes just pulses of sorrow. Other times vivid recollections of names, faces, fragments of thought from creatures she'd never seen again. But one message, found buried at the core of the archive, was repeated across dozens of entries. Transmitted in multiple harmonics, a final distillation of what she believed. Being human was never about breaking chains. It was about knowing when to free someone, even when no one else dares. That was the heartbeat of her legacy, not force. Choice. After the symposium, the Ethics Council passed a resolution banning all memory suppression devices in detainment systems. New legislation funded sanctuary worlds for rehabilitating species once used in cognitive warfare. A memorial was commissioned in Aeon's name, not a statue, but a silent chamber in orbit over Rixar 7, where visitors could stand and asterisk feel the unfiltered resonance of her journal for themselves. But not everyone remembered her kindly. Whispers still circled, governments who called her a destabilizing threat. Corporations who blamed her for billions lost in trade. Even human faction who feared what her gift might inspire in future generations. And that was the paradox. Aeon had not saved the galaxy. She had only asterisk reminded it that it still had a conscience asterisk. Whether it listened, that was never her goal, years later. The speaker who had told her story to the symposium returned to the sanctuary world where the Star Beast had once lived. There among the cliffs, now grown soft with moss, he found the remnants of Aeon's final shelter. Long abandoned, peaceful, he didn't find a grave, only a smooth patch of stone where someone had etched her last recorded message. Not with tools, but with pulse, he placed a translator stone against it. It flickered, and the words appeared, carried in waves through his fingertips, clear, unshakable, human. If you're human, don't ask how many enemies you can defeat. Ask if, when one reaches out with claws, you still choose to open your hands. The man stood in silence, letting the message pass through him. No monument could have held more weight. Aeon Varro was never declared a hero. She was never interviewed. Her name never trended. But across the scattered stars, in hidden sanctuaries and war-worn mines, her story became something far more dangerous than fame. It became a memory that refused to die. And in the end, that's what she had always wanted. Not to be remembered, but for them to be remembered. For the broken, the caged, the voiceless, to have someone who felt them once and did not run.